Hello again. Now I forgot to mention in the first round how I became a Christian. So this is quite important. So I'm just going to tell you how I became a Christian and how everything that stems from that really. I was 10 months when Billy Graham came to Haringey in 1954. And I remember seeing the posters on the railway stations very clearly. And my brother, who was now at Oxford, was very keen that I should go and hear him. And so I fought a bit, but he was my older brother, 7 years. In those days he sort of exercised a certain amount of authority over me. So I said, okay. And we went to London, to Haringey, and I remember queuing in the crowd, huge queues, to hear Billy Graham, and hearing the choir rehearse under Cliff Barrows, and I was absolutely taken. I was zapped. I'd never heard any choirs like it. It was a 1,000 voice choir, of course. And Cliff Barrows organised it extremely well. And I thought, I've never heard anything like this before. There must be something in all this. That's what I thought. We came into the stadium, Billy Graham preached. I don't remember very much what he said, but I knew at the end I had to go forward. So I went forward. My cousin also, Anthony, went forward. And he was counselled as I was. Then I was counselled by Mr. Edwards, still remember his name. And he was very kind and gave me verses of scripture to learn, which is a good start. So that's what happened, and I came back to Hayes Parish Church, where the vicar had been informed, I imagined, that I had stepped forward at the Haringey meeting. I can't remember now whether he saw me or chatted with me afterwards, one way or the other, I can't remember. All I do remember is that as the week slipped by again, I wondered what happened at Billy Graham. And I was at a crossroads, really, although I've never made much of it. And I thought to myself, I must try and get to Christchurch, Beckenham, because I've heard there's a wonderful youth club there and a lot going on. So I had a friend called Durst Mercer. He lived in Beckenham. I lived in Bromley, of course. So I had to cycle round to him, and we together went to the Caleb Club for the first time in September 1954. And from that moment, I never looked back. And it wasn't very long before Guy King was preaching. I think it was the text of Psalm, the harvest is past, the summer has ended, and we are not saved, from Jeremiah. But I can't be absolutely sure. Anyway, it was good enough for me to realize God was doing something in my heart, and I just really just came to Christ at that point. It completed what Billy Graham had started. And Christchurch Beckenham became a sanctuary for me, because it was a church with mission and ministry and good preaching. And everything stems from that, really. Well, that brings me to the present time where I was on the story. And this is that I was in St. Jude, Southsea. I had seen Dick Lucas, and he had written, and I had been interviewed in Paris and given the job of coming as the assistant minister of Christchurch, Durban. It's actually called Christchurch Addington in Durban. There was a beachfront church. So a lovely spot. We have beaches right there and then, just as I had in Southsea, which was rather good. So I went out, flew to Johannesburg. I always remember when we landed at Johannesburg, I said to myself, you don't know one single person in this whole country, not one. Having said that, I went to get the plane to Durban. I hadn't been booked on. So I had to wait the whole day from about 12 o'clock till about 7 o'clock in the evening before I could finally get one seat on a plane going to Durban from Johannesburg. So that's what happened, and I took the plane, and all the big crowd that was waiting to greet me had dispersed. All was left was Ross and Mary Mail and a few others. Anyway, we had a great time and met for the first time in our lives. And Ross became a fantastic friend. We took one another on spec and trusted that we would work together. Well, I've never worked better with anybody as I did with Ross Main. And we had a lovely relationship which went right on to the day of his death, more recently. Christchurch Addington grew in grace, I think, and we all grew with it. We had 80 or 90 in the mornings, 80 or 90 in the evenings, so it was quite a good congregation. It was a very happy congregation. Ross had been a very effective rector, and he and I just got on so well. We did things together. We even had staff meetings. Ross would say to me one day, let's go to the Elangeni, which is a big hotel there. We'll have our staff meeting there today. So we had these wonderful staff meetings with him, very relaxed and easy, and quietly confident of what God might be doing there for us. Christchurch Addington was a lovely development. I was thrilled to bits, really, once I got used to being there. Once I'd settled in, which probably took about October 1972. By Easter 1971, I was completely at home and loved it. And we had terrific fellowship. A lot of young people at my age bracket, male and female, and we had a really strong fellowship. And I organised my first house party while we were there. Lovely house party. Quite remember where it was now. It was called a place called Lincoln Haven, somewhere in the Drakensberg. And we had somewhere in the region, I can't remember, but a good number, by which time people like Alf Friend had joined us, and he became a great friend. David Cook, another one, great friend. He'd come out with the public schools, or rather what they call the private schools there, ministry among them. So we had that weekend and we had such fun on it, and all great seriousness as well, as the word was preached. Could have been David Cook the preacher, I can't remember. But that was the first of a number of weekend conferences that I'd organised at Christchurch Addington. One of the key moments in my life was the invitation by one of the vicars in South Durban. He asked me if I'd come and do a 3-hour meditation in his church. I'd never done it before. All the churches I served never had it, and it just didn't cross my experience. So I said, yes, I'll do it. He told me you divide it up into half-hour bits. You have a scripture reading, exposition on it, brief prayer, and then you start the hymn again. That happens 6 times, 3 hours. And we take the congregation and ourselves through that period of Jesus taking our sin on the cross. It's very, very moving. I came away absolutely sold on it. I thought it was an amazing, in fact, the most amazing service of the year. 3 hours of solid cross preaching. Very powerful indeed. And I determined from that moment on that I would do it in my ministry. And I shortly was informed by Ross that he would be moving to another job. in working with businessmen. And he said he wanted me to take his place as rector, which was a huge compliment, which I was appreciative, of course. So that was, round about Easter of 1972. At that time, Mary, or I knew as Mary Winkler, her uncle was passing through Durban, and he contacted Mr. Humphreys, and he asked him to contact me to take us all out to lunch. And we took, I remember that very well, we had lunch together. I said to him, by the way, is it possible, do you have Mary's address? He said, yes, I do, and gave it to me, which was a Swiss address. And actually, I think it was a Swiss address, but he gave it to me, and I subsequently wrote to her and said, I'm coming over in that part of that 6-week tour for somebody else's wedding, John Ellison's wedding. I'm going to be his best man. Will you be there? Mary was cautious in her reply, which is not surprising really. And she wrote back about 3 weeks later to say she was going to be there. And I had this strange belief she was the one. I had it deep-seated in my heart. God had done good things in my life, in my Christian life, and particularly around that time. And I thought, well, this could be it. So when the day came when I flew to London, I saw John Ellison pretty soon, having greeted my parents, that we then went off to Hartley Mordaunt, where he was going to marry Helen. Well, John buried his car as best he could in the bush to keep it away from Mary's brother and his friend, who would have put all kinds of tin cans on the back of it if they could possibly lay hold of the car. And we came back up again, and the service was due to start fairly soon. And I knew the Wintlers had arrived, so I went in with expectation through the door and looked carefully up the room. I thought, I saw, yes, that's Mary. And as I passed by, I think we probably just said hello or something like that. I thought with my heart, I'm sure she's right. From that moment. And at the end of it, God started to work in her as well. In a quite amazing way, in both of us really. So we weren't one behind the other. I think Mary had caught up with me by the end of the day. And I said I would take her back to the London airport because she had to go back, I think, that evening, or to go somewhere.
Switzerland.
Switzerland, yes. So that was the next thing. Once the do was all over, I took Mary and took her to London airport, where she got her plane back to Switzerland. And we arranged that I would come out for about 10 days, which I did. The amazing thing about that was she was living in a hostel for young people, and there were no rooms available at all, until suddenly she said that just at the right day, such and such it was coming up on this particular day, it's lasting for 10 days. It's exactly what we wanted. So we got that, and we were able to court together very happily, with her working each day, me sort of going and walking around the place, and then picking her up from the office around about 4 o'clock-ish. Then we'd have the evenings together. And the weekends, of course, we had 2 weekends thrown in, and we were able to spend that time going to see all kinds of different places, including Le Brie and that famous castle as well. We went to the castle. I can't remember the name of it now, unfortunately. We saw it together. We've got a picture of it somewhere. Then I flew back to London because I had business to do there, A little later to Zurich, where we met yet again, where we formally got engaged on the middle of the lake, Zurich. That was it. And then I took the plane to Nairobi and went on a tour of southern Africa, seeing the Victoria Falls as one of the key main events of that time. Arriving back in Durban after 6 weeks and telling everybody I'm afraid I now got engaged. And they said they were very pleased, all that jazz, you know. So Ross said to me, you don't want to wait too long, because we were thinking we might wait until the following spring. I said, don't wait. He said, get it as soon as you can. And recommended that we marry at the end of the year, which we did, December the 9th, 1972. From now on we had a new flat. I got another flat for Mary, which was a lovely flat on the front of Durban, looking up the north coast, which of course is the correct way around if you're living in the southern hemisphere. So there's a lovely view of the sea and a lovely flat in which to enjoy each other in those early years. And of course, during the course of that time, Carolyn arrived, which was great, of course. We were thrilled to bits with her. But she also sent us a signal, because when she became about 18 months, something like that, we had a balcony. And she picked something up, like a little stool, I can't remember exactly what it was, went over to the balcony, got on the stool, and her little head could just see over the top. And I said to Mary, we've now got two options. One is we move to the rectory where Ross was still living, or two, we decide to unwind and go back to England. Again, the amazing thing was, almost exactly the same time, there's a letter from a dear friend who I got to know. He came out to Durban for a year with his family to study. He was an Oxford Don, a Christian man, and we got to know him. And he sent me a letter to say that Christchurch Abingdon, this place was available on the market. I called it came on the market. Would you like to apply? So I thought, well, we'd better do that. It sounds interesting. It's a nice place. And the church itself was a absolute going concern. That's what we decided to do. So I wrote off, and I was invited to come over for an interview. I can't remember exactly the month it was, but I think it was probably October-ish, November 1975. And we waited, I then flew back, of course, to await the result, and we had either a letter or a telegram to say that we would be, we had been appointed to be the next curate in charge of Christchurch Abingdon. So we moved over there in May of 1976. It came to an end, one of the happiest, most beautiful times of ministry in my life. Christchurch, Durban, will forever remembered in my heart. It was such a lovely place. We had so many wonderful experiences there. As we did in Southsea, but special, I think, Durban. And we decided to come home by ship. And we came on the old Windsor Castle with Carolyn, now a old toddler. And we thought, well, we can put her into the creche and thoroughly enjoy ourselves and have a good rest. That was not to be. She absolutely insisted that she did not wish to remain in there on her own. Therefore, we had to decide what we were going to do. And in the end, I spent as much time in the creche as I did anywhere else, keeping an eye on her, because she wouldn't do it otherwise. So, unfortunately, it wasn't quite the rest cure that we'd been hoping for, which, of course, is so utterly typical of families with young children. And we finally arrived in the docks at Southampton, and who should be there to meet us but Peter Barton, who was the church warden of Abingdon. And it was such a lovely relationship which we developed with him and his wife Jean, and they took us back up to Abingdon from there. And I can't remember how we got hold of the furniture, how long it took us to get sorted out there, having come all that way from Durban. But it was a good development and bigger church. It was founded by laymen and women, mainly from the the scientific part of Harwell and places like that. The parish church in Abingdon is the widest in the country. It's very wide indeed. But so we had 4.5 years at Abingdon, during which time Richard came along in November of 1977. So he made another number 2, which we probably thought that would be it. And Carolyn was now at nursery school, and Meg and I were happy there. Anyway, we decided to leave when the door to another door opened up. And out of the blue, quite literally, St Mary's Upton on the Wirral contacted us through the stewards, through the trustees. And the trustees got me on the phone and they said, would you be interested in going to St Mary's Upton? And I said, well, I have read about it because I've heard what an amazing ministry. Who? Roy Barker, that's it, Roy Barker. And he decided to leave because he hadn't been very well. So off we went on a day return from Oxford to Upton Wirral. Met in the car a crew station. And from there we were driven by the church wardens to see the parish, meet people for lunch, get a general quick feel of what it was about, the church itself, etc., etc. It was one of the most going concerned churches in the Diocese of Chester, and one of its biggest churches. So it was quite an exciting possibility. Bigger even than Christchurch Abingdon, which was a good size as well. Anyway, we decided, after much thinking and praying, and as one does, to accept. And that led to 13 wonderful years, when our third child, in 1982, came out of the blue, Michael. So we were then fully fledged parents of 3 children, which we were very happy about. That went very well indeed. It was a very immensely happy, it had the same happy feel as Christchurch Durban. Wonderfully warm fellowship, as indeed was Abingdon too. And we did some wonderful things there, like I suppose the thing that people remember me most for will be the Billy Graham Crusades in 1984, and the Fox Hill weekends, 7 of them I think there were, in the July of each year from 1981 onwards until 87. So that was a very important time in our ministry, wonderful years, many, many friendships, not only of course with St Mary's but with Christchurch Abingdon and Christchurch Durban and St Jude Southsea. We now had all these churches.